child's life. I'd like to introduce myself and my family. This is my family. My wife Allison, top left corner there. To her right, middle row there is Ezekiel. We call him Zeke or Bubba. Next one over is Isabella, also known as Bella. And then Catrielle, we call her Ellie. And they aren't quite here yet. My wife was loading them up and bringing them over. They're running a few minutes late. Believe it or not, our family is running late. All the way down to the bottom row there is Lucy. Next to her is Kayla, and then Mitchell and Samuel. My wife is due with our 8th child. And Wednesday, the 26th, we'll be going into the hospital and having ourselves another baby. So that'll be number 8. We're very excited. We're hoping it's a boy kind of, just because it'd be neat to tie things back up again. But that's my family. I am a pastor actually here at this church. What we're going to be talking about tonight has nothing to do with church, just has to do with conflict. And so I hope you aren't scared of the fact that you're going to get preached at or something by a preacher. That's not what's going to be happening. We're going to be talking about some principles here to work through some of this stuff. An introduction to conflict. I'm not sure what color that is. Is that salmon color? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that funky colored paper that nobody else wanted to use, so I printed on it. They've got some notes there if you'd like to fill in, great. If not, introduction to conflict. Here's what we got first. I like to lighten things up right away. Here it says, I won't bully you when I have my growth spurt if you won't bully me when you have yours. This is conflict management. This young man is smart enough to be thinking down the road. He's maybe understood what bullying is about. Bullying is definitely a conflict. Now, why is there conflict? This is where we interact. And so now you get to tell me why you think there's conflict.
Because people have 2 different opinions.
Okay, different opinions can create conflict. And this will go really quick if you don't say anything, so please talk. Give your pizza time to digest. Just go ahead.
Different objectives?
Different objectives, yeah. Especially if you're supposed to be working towards the same goal and your same goal looks differently to 2 different people. That could create some conflict, yeah. Oh, that's a great example. No, really. You're saying lack of communication. That's a perfect example of how conflict has a common component, right? Yeah. Well, here, I've got a short list. I put down the other person's selfish. I like the word selfish because it really is true. The other person's always selfish. At least it always seems that way, right? There's a common component of conflict. Here's the second one that I see. Whoops. Oh, that's an example of it. Janice and I had a fight, but don't worry, making dinner will calm her down. Notice that Janice is holding the gun?
Yeah.
Somebody's selfish in that relationship. We're not going to point fingers. Here's the second one. You're selfish. Could you see how maybe there were 2 selfish people, both wanting what they wanted? That could cause conflict. My wife had a doctor's appointment this morning and got to see that repeatedly as my children were getting tired before naps. They wanted that, and they wanted that, and they both wanted it at the same time. Create conflict. They're both selfish. Bad communication. That could be considered no communication, could be considered lack of communication. A lot of people think they're communicating and they really aren't. But those right there are 3 key components. Now here's the last one. I thought you said your wife wasn't contesting the divorce. I think there's probably a lack of communication there. I'm hoping. Or he's blind, one of the 2. Here we go. The correct answer is D, all of the above. Usually every single one of those aspects are going to fall into conflict. Usually it has to do with both people wanting something, okay? And what we're all talking about basically can boil down to those 3 things, selfishness and communication. Almost every single conflict is from these things. Who are the people that have impact in your child's life, okay? Who are they?
Teachers?
Teachers.
Grandparents?
Grandparents, yep.
Coaches?
Coaches.
Friends?
Friends, good. Daycare.
Family?
Yeah, family. Family can have a big impact, positive and negative sometimes.
And actually, like, enemies, I don't know if that's what you want to call it, you know? If
Yeah.
you have like a bully or a friend that's not really a friend that impacts their day at school or
Really?
something.
Anybody that they come in contact can have an impact on them in some way, right? Here's the list I have. Ex-spouses, okay, if you've got split marriages, they can have an impact on your child. Coaches, you mentioned that one. Teachers, obviously teachers, I mean, how many hours a day is a child at school? A long time. I've actually had, I've heard of teachers telling children, you know, you don't have to listen to what your parents tell you. That's very scary. Now, obviously, if there's a case of abuse or something like that, yeah, there's some issues there, but by and large, in my opinion, is children should listen to what their parents have to say. And so a teacher could have a positive or a negative impact. Live-in boyfriend, girlfriend, if there's not a marriage there, and there's somebody new in every 2, 3, 6, 8 months, that's going to have an impact on the child. Other relatives, you guys mentioned that one. Child care providers, a lot of, how many of you are child care providers in here? Okay. Counselors, school counselors even. If there's a kid who looks like they're struggling, they pull in a counselor. Sometimes it's the nurse is the school counselor, maybe the assistant principal, but they're going to talk to the child. There will be impact in that child's life. Peers, children the same age can have an impact, even a little older, a little younger. How many of you live in the country? How many of you live in the city? Okay? I grew up in the city, and so we had an entire neighborhood network of kids. We knew where we were allowed to be at certain times of the day, certain parts of the week. We knew whose yards we were allowed to play in. We knew whose moms would call on us if they saw us doing something. You know, there was a lot to it. But you know what? Those peers had an impact on the way I lived. I put down church personnel because some of them go to Sunday school or go to vacation Bible schools, things like that. They're involved in other areas. And so church personnel can have an impact in your child's life. Now there's the short list. We've talked about what the components are. We've talked about some people that have an impact, okay? And each time one of those people is involved in your child's life, the problem of conflict can arise because they're impacting your child, or they could be impacting you, or impacting your child in a way that you don't particularly care for, which will create conflict. So, what are some common conflicts involving your child and other people?
Behavior.
Okay, behavior.
Discipline.
Discipline. Give me an example of discipline.
Well, an example we had this weekend was my kids spent the night with their grandparents they've never spent with before, and we had to have a talk with them about not spanking them. They were not allowed to spank them. Didn't go over so well. She thought that she should be able to if they eat a rose, and I just told her no. You know, it's not gonna happen.
That could create some tension, couldn't it?
You know, it was okay though. She knew she couldn't do it, she didn't do it, my kids
Yeah.
survived, and life is good.
Okay, good. What are those types of conflicts?
Shared parenting.
Yeah, shared parenting. That can create a lot of conflicts. Shared parenting within the same house or in split homes definitely can create conflict. Usually, if it's a split home, it's because mom and dad couldn't get along so well because they had different views on things, probably. Do you think the views magically change and work out okay if they live in 2 separate houses? No, they still have their opinions, right? It's going to have an impact on that child. It'll probably lead to some conflicts here and there. I put down bullying. Bullying can have a huge negative impact on your child. I was actually up at the video game store in Grand Rapids there, getting a video game that was being released for our kids to play. And there's a new game coming out actually called Bully. And it shows this big, strong person giving a wedgie to this little nerdy type kid. And I pulled it over and started reading through the game, and basically it's a game about bullying. You're the bully.
That's scary.
That's entertainment, huh? People are going to pay 40, 50 bucks a shot to get this game. It's kind of scary to me. But bullying can have a huge impact. And how you deal with that situation can have a huge impact. Lack of rules can have a huge impact on your child's life. Maybe you've got a set of rules that you like to follow. Your children know that. When they're inside your house, they know what's expected of them. But as soon as they walk out of that house and go to someone else's house, do they have to follow your rules still? Do they know if they have to follow your rules? If it is a split home where you're going to another parent's house, is it fair to discuss that with a child before you go? Now, I know Dad's going to say this when you get there, but no, you can't do that. How's that going to impact your child? It's going to be kind of confusing, probably. Different rules. So lack of rules and different rules, both those things are going to create conflict in your child's life. Slander. This is one that I particularly don't like at all. Slander is a word in the legal sense where basically you're defaming somebody's name. You're saying something about them with the intent of damaging their reputation or their character. And a lot of times, this happens in split homes, okay? Spouse talking bad about the other spouse in the child's presence, maybe before they go to Dad's for the weekend, maybe before they go to Mom's for the weekend. And you know what? The child loves both the parents. That's very damaging to their mind. They're processing through, well, why would you say that about somebody I love? Unfair treatment. Now, unfair in whose opinion? Obviously, if you're setting up rules for your child, they're going to think that's unfair, probably. So when I say unfair treatment, what do you think that means?
If you treat them one way one day and treat them another way the next day regarding the same thing.
Okay. Usually it comes back to inconsistency on your part, okay? So unfair treatment, if the child's confused about what's expected of them, it probably has something to do with you and maybe the way you explain things one time or didn't explain things the other time. So that's going to have an impact because, again, a child that's confused is going to act out in different ways, which will lead to conflict. Too much extra work can create conflict. And when I say extra work, I'm saying you expect a lot of a child. Way, tons and tons of stuff. My children have different chores that are expected of them. But, you know, if they work hard, they can have their chores done in about 30 to 40 minutes. And I think that's very fair. Now, if it takes them 30 to 40 minutes to just pick up the clothes on their floor, then we have a problem, okay? And they might think that's too much extra work. I shouldn't have to pick up all my clothes. Do you expect me to do it? Did I put them on the floor? No. That's your responsibility. You have to explain that to them. Okay, too much extra work can create conflict. Neglect can create conflict. If a child is left unattended, they start to fend for themselves as best they can. And you know what? That's going to create conflict because the child's not going to have the caregiver's attention to help form and shape their life, okay? To help them to understand right and wrong and so forth. So neglect can create conflict. Bad advice can create conflict. You're thinking bad advice. Where do they get bad advice? I think peers give great bad advice. Okay? I see that all the time with middle school, high school students especially. A child struggling with something, they go talk to their friends. Their friends tell them exactly what they think, which probably agrees with what they thought. It really doesn't solve the situation, just kind of builds up and makes the kid feel good. Well, it's good to be mad at my parents about that. Yeah, that's because that's what my friend said. Well, your friend's not your parent. They didn't bring you into the world. They're not taking care of you. They're not paying your bills. I have no problem with people giving advice to my children as long as they're willing to help pay for dental bills and pay for clothes and shoes, you know. Don't give them your opinion unless I ask you to give them your opinion. Don't care. Apathy can create conflict. Apathy. Kid asks you, can you do this? I don't care. Well, do you have an opinion on the subject? You have to have an opinion on the subject. If you just don't care, the kid's going to think, well, maybe you just don't need to care about things in life, and that's going to lead to a whole other set of problems, okay? That can create conflict. Complacency, very similar to apathy. Lifestyle habits. And when I say lifestyle habits, might mean the kind of food you eat, maybe the amount of food we eat, maybe regular meals, maybe drugs, alcohol, smoking, okay? So when I talk lifestyle habits, I'm just saying the things that we do as a lifestyle can have an effect and can lead to conflict with a child. Can you see how that could happen? Yeah, okay. I don't know if I need to explain that or not. Abuse. Obviously, abuse is going to have impact. It's going to create conflicts. Children are going to withdraw, whether it's verbal, physical, any other form of abuse that you can think of. It's going to have an effect on that child, and it will create conflict because as that child begins to pull away, he's starting to think for himself, trying to figure out what do I do to manage what's going on in my life. Now, identifying conflict and establishing a plan. This is the second part here. This we're going to talk about. First thing is the smell of conflict. What does conflict smell like? Any clues? Anxiety. Okay, good. It really doesn't have an odor. That was just a figure of speech. At least not my experience.
A different tone of voice or facial expression.
Okay.
Body language.
Yeah, it can look a lot of ways. Okay? Example 1, explosion. Explosion. You ready for this? Example 1, explosion. What happened there? Okay, wait, what?
Lost control.
Lost control? What? Somebody else said something else.
I said very frustrated.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody experience frustration with computers ever? I remember when they first came daily. When they first came out, there was a little popular sign that went around. It was like this duck with a sledgehammer, and it said, "Hit any key to continue." That just made me smile every time I saw that. Obviously, this guy must have gotten the blue screen of death, and the computer stopped working for the 4th time that hour, and he exploded. Okay, he had been holding that stuff inside, and he couldn't deal with it anymore, and he exploded. Well, guess what? If you have a child that's exploding, and you're thinking, where did that come from? There's some conflict in the child's life. You need to figure out where that conflict came from. Okay, weird behavior. Weird behavior is another thing, another example. It could be facial expressions, could be maybe change in style of dress, maybe a different style of music that they're listening to. It could be grades in school. It could be a lot of things like that. But things that are different, that strike you as different from anything else that's been going on. Here's an example. Hey, Pete, what are you doing up here? Pete, are you trying to avoid me? Pete? There's this grown man hiding in the bushes. I'm smelling conflict. There's some conflict in that man's life. Otherwise, grown men don't usually just go out and sit in the bushes unless they're hunting. Okay? And some have to question, is that really weird behavior or not? I personally think, never mind, we don't want to go on this, right? No, I'll tell you, because I think it's just bizarre. Ice fishing. Go and sit on ice.
We love to do that.
Do you? Good for you. I don't think I will ever understand that. To me, that is weird behavior. I think there's conflict there. Okay? That's just how I see it. Let's move on. Okay? Withdrawn. If a child withdraws, if you've had a social butterfly, just always out there, enjoyable, smiling, happy, and that child all of a sudden comes home from school, goes to the room, shuts the door, comes to dinner if you make them, really doesn't want to go to a friend's house, doesn't want to go out to other people's houses, doesn't want to go out in public. They just, guess what? That's a sign of conflict. There's something going on in that child's life, and that's how they're withdrawing to kind of help protect themselves from probably some hurt of some sort. Anger. Another example of anger is different. Anger is different than explosion because anger is just this thing that's constantly going on. An explosion is where something's built up, built up, built up, bam, and they explode. But anger, have you ever met an angry person? They're just always angry. Nothing you can say or do is going to make them smile. And those are the people you see at the store, at the service counter, giving that person a hard time for the quality of the product they bought at another store, but are returning it at that store. They have no business. They didn't make the cooking utensil. You know, they didn't make the air compressor. The store sold it. But that person feels as though they really did convey that with an angry voice, possibly swearing. It really irritates me when people do that in public places like that. Anger. Here's an example. Why do I get the feeling that he's not willing to leave our disagreement at the office? It's an angry person, carrying it, holding on to it. Now, what do you do when you smell conflict? So we've established some different things what conflict looks like. If you see some things going on, what are some typical behaviors? Here's what you do. First thing you need to do is research. When I say research, I mean you need to start gathering data. You need to start getting as much information about the situation as possible. Why would you want to gather information?
So you can understand.
Yeah. The only way you're going to understand the situation is if you go and get the information about the situation and start processing. What do you think may be a good way to gather information?
Talk.
What?
Talk.
Talk, yes.
Or listen to, if it's a child, listen to your child talk to other children.
Mhm.
Or even talk to a brother or sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch how they play. How about psychic friends? We call them up. They gonna help us? Probably not. Research, you have to gather data. The first place you want to gather data is from your child. If your child will talk to you, and hopefully you've built a relationship with them, you can start asking them questions. Now, if a child's withdrawn, do you go up and just open the door to the room and say, "Why are you up here by yourself all the time? Get downstairs. You need to explain why you're up here all the time." And the child will be like, "Oh, okay, Dad must care about me. I better go downstairs and explain," right? Is that how it's going to happen? No. Do you bake them? "You want a donut? I'll give you a donut if you come down and tell me what's bothering you." Is that how you do it?
Kind of get down in their level, you get down, I lay on the floor and put my feet up on, like in my daughter's room, you know,
Okay.
and just talk in her tones and
Okay.
stuff like that.
What do you do though if you got a teenager that is withdrawn, but doesn't, and you talk to them, you sit one-on-one, but still doesn't open up?
Do they give you one-word answers?
Yes,
That means you have to have a whole lot of questions.
we try.
That's how you gain information, through dialogue. I mean, now, some people just are not talkers. You know, one word is getting a lot out of them. And so you just have to be very picky about those questions. And you have to build that relationship in such a way that they know, if you're coming to ask them a question, well, Mom and Dad, or whoever, must want some information from me. And so I better just answer it. Do you have a hand up?
I was just kind of wondering, the approach that you take when you're opening that dialogue, don't you think that has to be kind of specific to the gender and then also to the age range? So if it's a young child or an older child, is it a boy, is it a girl kind of thing?
Yep, and I guess this is where I'm going at, because what you're talking about there, that's almost like a whole other topic myself, just talking to children and talking to students. And that's, we could spend a couple days actually probably just talking about that. And it's very true. What I'm hoping is that because you guys are here, you're involved parents or whatever, and so you actually are trying to build and maintain relationships with your students, okay? If you have struggled through child rearing and you've got a 14, 13, 15-year-old child that doesn't like you, gives you all sorts of problems, well, I'm sorry, you're in a hard spot. And yes, there are some things you can do, and that's, again, that's more than we talk about even in a one-night session like this. But hopefully you've been building into them that relationship, that love relationship with them, so that if you come and you talk to them, they understand that you're trying to dialogue with them. Yes, you need to get down at their level depending on their age. You need to talk to them, don't talk in their lingo, okay? They use slang, all sorts of stuff. You can be friendly to a child, but they don't need you to be their friend. They need you to be their parent or their caregiver at that point. Yes, you can be friendly to them, you can enjoy them, but they need an authority that's going to say, listen, I love you, so this is what's happening, okay? So, and that's almost jumping into one other topic there, but when you're doing research, you need to understand, right? It might come down to saying, listen, I know you don't want to talk to me, but guess what? I know something's going on in your life, I love you enough to say, we need to talk. And if that means I sit here for the next hour and ask you questions and you answer with one word, I'm going to do that. And maybe it'll just be, they'll give you some information, and again, that's not the best way to do it. Hopefully you've been building in that communication, that dialogue's been open the whole time. If it's not, then again, that's like a whole other topic, and I don't want to get into all that tonight. But you need to get research. You can get that from the child, you can get that from the child's friend, you can get that through watching your child play. Maybe you've got notices from the school, from counselors or teachers, things of that nature. So get as much information as you can about what's going on. Okay, that's research. Here's the second part, make a list. Now I say make a list for two reasons. One, I typically don't remember everything, and so if I don't make a list, I will forget something, okay? And I find that's pretty true for most people. However, the nice thing about making a list is you make a list of things that are going on, things that you've discovered. It's almost like you can begin connecting the dots. You can look and say, oh look, little Johnny, and I use the word Johnny because most people aren't called Johnny anymore. So little Johnny is having a hard time playing with people. He's taking their things, he's breaking other people's things, he's not treating his toys well. Okay, so there's something going on there dealing with those things and the way he treats these things. Okay, so you start to see a pattern that way. Or maybe you're looking down and you're seeing that this person doesn't like this, or doesn't like this, or doesn't like this, and you're thinking, oh, you know what, those things, they all have something in common. They'll have to do with food. Well, maybe there's something going on in their life dealing with food. Could be an allergy. You know, when we actually have a disease in our family, a genetic thing called celiac sprue disease. And actually over in our gymnasium right now, there's a support group meeting for that for Berry County. And our daughter was constantly giving us fits, not wanting to eat. Not wanting to eat. Well, being the good parents we were, like, you need to eat. And so we'd sit there and help her, and she'd take bites, and she'd complain that her stomach hurt. And we're like, yeah, your stomach hurts. How could it hurt? It probably hurt because you didn't eat enough. Well, this went on for about a year, and she was about 3 years old at the time, so it wasn't a lot of talking, communication. All of a sudden, we started to think, you know, maybe there's something going on here. Maybe there's some sort of an allergy. Maybe it is painful for her to eat. Maybe, and so we took her in to get checked out, did all sorts of tests, and eventually came to this thing that realized that anytime she had anything with wheat in it, it was making her sick to her stomach. And she was dying. Fortunately, we figured that out, found out that I have it, and one of my sons has it, and so we've adjusted our diets. Now, things are going great, but you know what? We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't stopped and taken note of all these things that had to do with food and her eating. It started beginning to affect her play. She was always lazy and lethargic. Well, we just thought she was being lazy. Go and play. She just go and we find her laying on her bed. So you have to start taking note of those things. When you do your research, make a list. Make a plan. This is the third part of this. You have to think through what information is had, okay? You look through, you make a list, and then you have to decide, what am I going to do now towards resolving this conflict? What is it that you can do? If this is a conflict with a teacher, what are you going to do? If this is a conflict with a coach, what are you going to do? If this is a conflict with grandparents or families or ex-spouses or boyfriends, or you fill in the blank. Each one of those things are definitely going to be dealt with differently. but make a plan. If you don't have a plan, you aren't going to get anywhere. It's going to remain the same. And a lot of you sit there thinking, why are you telling me that? Well, I'm telling you that because even though it makes sense, a lot of times we don't do it. And the problem just kind of stays. So, make a plan. Now, here's where we get into the most important part of the night. It's the tools for conflict resolution. And these tools are generic tools. They work whether you're working with an adult, a spouse, a child, you fill in the blank. If there is a conflict, the tools that we're going to share right now are going to change your life forever. That's right. And for 3 payments of $19.95, we'll throw in a set of Ginsu knives at this, okay? No. But this information really has changed my life. With this information, I'm building this up here so that you're going to be sitting there, well, tell me, okay? With this information, believe it or not, almost any conflict can be resolved in 15 minutes to 30 minutes. 15 to 30 minutes, any conflict can be resolved. You're thinking, that's impossible! Well, if you have lots of conflicts that have built up over the last 15 years, yeah, it's not going to be resolved in 15 minutes, but we'll talk about something you'll understand how this is going to work. Here we go. Here's the first thing. These are called the 4 rules of communication. And believe it or not, these are just principles that you can apply. Here we go. First one, be honest. Think about that. Yeah. Did your pen run out? It's okay. We'll let you have another pen.
Thank you.
And where's the pen that ran out? Throw it on the floor so I don't want to pick it up and put it back in here again. Be honest. Now think about this for a second. Why would you want to be honest in conflict resolution?
Because sometimes that makes it worse if you have a conflict.
You're not gonna resolve anything though, if you're honest.
This
You don't
is
open
true.
up.
Exactly.
That's true.
You're right. You always tell your kids, don't lie to me. But they know that if they told you that they're the ones that colored on the wall, they're the ones that are going to punish, right? So for them, why would I tell you the truth, right? Because it's going to be unpleasant, isn't it? But then it will be over.
I just gotta say real quick.
Go ahead.
I had a situation with a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I was honest. You know, calmly honest.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made it worse. You know, my honesty, it just made it worse. Because the coach just continued to get angry.
Tell you what, at the end we're going to do some open dialogue if we have time. We'll talk about a specific situation because there's always that coaches specifically coaches in children's sports, being honest with them seems to have negative impact a lot of times. Okay, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so be honest. You are not going to be able to resolve a problem unless you actually are talking about the problem. You have to it's not going to be fun. They're not going to like it. You might not like it. It's going to be uncomfortable. Your stomach's going to get all knotted up. But unless you are honest, it's just going to stay there and fester. And in my case, if I keep things inside me, my knots just turn into, I don't know if I get ulcers, but I think I'm doing pretty good about that. I don't walk around with a sick stomach all the time now because I've dealt with it and I move on. Sounds more like Dr. Phil, huh? Okay, be honest. That's the first rule of communication.
What was that? Yeah.
I did it. I'm learning to do bird calls.
It didn't sound like you.
Well, it was. I do several kinds of bird calls.
Bird call?
Yeah.
What was that?
That was a South African yellow-bellied ducksucker.
Do you know any more bird calls? What was that?
Hummingbird.
So if you hadn't noticed by now, there's a cuckoo clock stuffed underneath her bathrobe. And this, of course, is what TV show? Okay. Now, I'm using this clip and talking with honesty for one reason. If you have any reruns or if you have access to watching this show, I want you to peruse them. And what you're going to find is that almost every episode deals with Lucy lying about something. She wants to do something, talks to Ricky, he's like, no. She goes behind his back, does it anyway, and then at the end of the show, something like this happens, she gets caught in her lie, and that's where everybody sits there and laughs uncontrollably, right? Almost every episode. You have to be honest. Otherwise, problems are going to come up. Okay, here's the next one. Keep current. Keep current. Now, this is probably, well, they're actually all equally important, but this is a very important one, and this is why. Keeping current. I mentioned that if you follow these rules, most problems can be resolved within 15 to 30 minutes. Okay? The exception is if you have a whole bunch of problems that you've not dealt with over the last 10, 15 years, it's going to take you time to get through all that stuff. And then eventually you get to a point where you're current. And once you're current, then it takes 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes at the most to resolve conflict. This is how it works. Let's say you get ready to leave for work one day, and whoever else has lived in your house, or probably a husband or something like that, has taken your car and backed the car into the garage. This irritates you. Why did he do that? Now I have to walk around the other side, and there's not as much room on that side to get in, so you come over, you squeeze past, trying not to get the dirt and Michigan roads on you, and you open the door and you're trying to squeeze in and get in the car, right? Boy, it really irritates you. You drive to work, you have a bad day because the day started out bad. You come out the next day, it's that way again. Oh. And see, it irritates you. Well, if you're honest about it, what are you going to do? You're going to talk to the person who's doing this. Now, it's our church phones here.
Oh, okay.
Somebody's calling. If you're honest, you're going to deal with this and you're going to take care of it right away. But no. What do we normally do? Well, just let it go. We call this gunny sack, and this is what happens. Something that happens to you, instead of being honest, what you do is you open up this potato sack, basically, and you take that problem, you throw it in there, and you kind of hold it on your shoulder. You come in, and they left their socks, not in the hamper, but next to the hamper. They're very close. Oh, that irritates you. You throw the dirty clothes thing in your gunny sack, right? You come along downstairs, they put the milk carton back in without the lid on it. Like, oh, that irritates me. And you throw that in there. And so you're constantly taking these problems and you're throwing them in, you're throwing them in, throwing them in, throwing them in, until finally you've got this big old sack full of problems. And usually, what's going to happen is maybe your husband or someone will come home late from work, and all of a sudden, why are you coming late for work? Why did you call me? And you open the sack and you start shaking and dumping and all these things that have nothing to do with the fact that he was late 5 minutes home from work because of the construction, okay, on the Michigan roads. And you're dumping and you're pouring all this stuff out because you didn't keep current and you didn't deal with these things as they came up. Now, if you dealt with this one problem when it came up, there might have been a different circumstance. There might have been a different response. So, you come home from work, your husband's there, you say, you know, I went to leave for work today, and this is what happened. I had to work really hard to get in the car because the door's on that side of the garage, and there's all this stuff over there, and it really bothered me. Is there any reason why you did that? Yeah, I'd heard you talking to your friend how you hate backing the car up, and so I thought I'd back the car in the garage so you could pull straight out. For one time in your life, your husband was being thoughtful, okay? And this is a good thing. And if you take, now, not every situation that you're not like it, this is just a positive spin I'm throwing on that example, but you know what? If you keep current, it takes care of that problem, and then it's done. You resolve the conflict, and you move on. So you have to keep current. You can't keep things in there because if you're keeping things in this gunny sack, what happens eventually is you're going to explode and you're just going to shake all this junk out that you've been holding on to that has nothing to do with the problem that just happened. It's just a whole bunch of other stuff that you don't like. Now typically that's more with spouses, but it can happen with you and your children. It can happen with you, ex-spouses, and your children in the middle of that. All those different things that can happen. So you have to keep current. When something happens, you're honest, and you deal with it right then, keep current. Okay? That's rule 2. Here's number 3. Oh, wait. Example of that. I keep forgetting this. More element benefits. Santa is a meanie. Elves are people too. No raise, no toys, ho-ho, Santa's got to go. Okay? Example of elves that gunny sack stuff and didn't keep current. They told Santa that they were upset about their wages, he would have fixed it, right? It's not that hard to pay the sugar cookies. So here we go. Number 3, attack the problem, not the person. This is almost self-explanatory. But because I wrote it up there, I'm going to explain it anyway. That way you get your money's worth tonight. Attack the problem, not the person. So let's say that your child has taken a marker and drawn on the furniture. How do you react? Well, if you're like our house, you'd say, well, that's why we had the same furniture we bought 15 years ago, because we figured it was going to happen. We're not going to buy nice furniture until the kids are gone. I mean, we tell them they can't do that other people's furniture, and we really appreciate it if they didn't do it. We explain that to them. We take away their markers for a while, so you can only use the crayons that wash off now, okay? That's how we would handle it. We dealt with the problem. We didn't come after the child saying, why did you do that? You're such a terrible artist. At least if you're going to draw a horse, make the legs the right size. That's attacking the person. Now, again, I'm being kind of corny in that because I don't want to be a meanie. But you know what? You can't be attacking the person. If you're attacking the person in the situation, you aren't dealing with the real problem. Now, obviously, that person's attached to the problem, but you have to deal with the actual problem itself. Was the problem the child drawing? Was the problem the child drawing on the furniture? Or was the problem the child had markers? What was the problem? What's that? Okay, could have been drawing the furniture. Here, I'll tell you how it is in our house. We actually have rules. Children under this age can only use the writing utensils in these belt boxes on these shelves. So if this happened to be one of my younger kids who got into the older kids' boxes that had the markers, well, it might not have been that little child's fault. Maybe one of the older kids put the box down on the wrong shelf. And the younger child just thought, bonus, I'm allowed to use these today. Right? So how is yelling at the child going to fix it? The problem was actually one of the older kids left something, and we actually have this problem all the time. They leave pencils and pens laying out where the little ones can get it. And we're not worried about them drawing, we're worried about them falling and poking something. Which reminds me, I should have put this picture in here. My dad emailed this picture of a little kid that had been running with his fork. You guys seen it? The fork straight through the nose? When my son saw it the other day, he almost passed out. That was just free. Anyway, so you attack the problem. You have to actually do that research. You have to think through what's going on, what is the actual conflict here, and then you have to say, okay, it's really, yeah, if the kid has a pen, obviously they're going to mark on stuff. That's why we don't let them have the pen. So the problem is then going actually to the person that left the pen where the younger child could get it. Sometimes that's actually been me. I use permanent markers when I'm like doing woodworking or marking something that I have to mark. And if I do that and I set it down on the chair, well, guess what? The chair's the right height for that child to grab it. And they don't understand the damage they're going to do with that. So you have to figure out what the problem is and attack that problem. Don't just attack a person that's involved in that conflict. What's the real problem? And sometimes you're going to see the real problem after you've done that research and you've made your list, looking at that stuff and saying, you know, the real problem here isn't my child, the real problem is the coach. Or maybe you're going to find that the real problem isn't the coach, it's the child. If someone comes and tells me that my child is misbehaving, do I assume that the person's a liar? No, I've seen my children. I assume that the person's probably telling me the truth. Now, might they exaggerate? Maybe. But you better believe I'm not just going to jump all over my kid. I'm going to go and talk to them about it. I'm going to do my research. Most of the time the kids will come clean and say, yeah, I did that. Attack the problem, not the person. Here's the example here. I think I found the way to resolve our personality differences. He's attacking the person, not the problem. You see, if you work in the business place, and every time you come into a personality conflict, something like that, your way to do that is just to let that person go. Guess what? There's going to be another person coming, and you're going to have that same problem again. Might not be him, might be a different version. But if you're in a place of leadership where you have the ability to let people go, and you just constantly let people go, you're not fixing the problem. You're just getting rid of the person that you have a problem with. So, that's free. Here we go. Number 4, act, don't react. This too is almost self-explanatory, but again, I'll explain it for you. When you see your child, and they have taken a permanent marker and drawn all over the wall, what is your response? Okay, first take the marker away. Okay? What else?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yell, groan, grunt, scream. If they got the marker still in their hand, a lot of times the first word out of my mouth is no! Okay? Now, if you have young children, and you know that's a possibility, you need to have a plan for this. So I walk into the room and I see my child doing something or has destroyed something. Personal safety, that's the first part of my plan. Is my child in danger of hurting himself or others? If so, I immediately grab them. Okay? So if personal danger is involved, obviously that's the first part of my plan. If I was just walking in and seeing that, and they're no longer there, my first plan of action is to leave the room. Because if I stay there and continue to look at it, I'm getting mad. Sometimes I'll go and get my wife, or my wife will come and get me. Say, did you see this? Come here. That's not always a good thing because then both of us are angry. But at least she can hold me back, right? Okay? Because usually one of us are sound enough that we can actually work on trying to downplay it. Okay? One of us hasn't been around the kids as much that day, so we're not as stressed out. Instead of be like, well, let's hold on. What's our plan? What are we going to do? And we actually have to think through how to not just react. Because if you react to a situation, usually it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's not going to be a positive thing. It's going to be an attack type thing. If this happens at the office and somebody treats you unfairly, do you have a plan for that? Is it attack back? You know, I really don't watch a whole lot of TV, but I have seen a few episodes of The Apprentice with Donald Trump. And he takes these people into the boardrooms, and he's got himself and then 2 of his people sitting there, his daughter usually and somebody else. And I think what they do is they just sit there and they try to get people to get at each other's throat. They'll ask questions. What'd you think when they did that to you? How'd that make you feel? Did you want to say anything to them? Do you think that was a good decision? And they sit there and they just start pushing people's buttons, trying to get them to act and be angry at each other. I happened to see this last week, and there was a Trace Adkins, and I think one of the Baldwin brothers, I don't know who. They were in there, and before they went in that office to be dealt with, basically they both had come to the agreement that they liked each other. They thought each other were great guys. And whichever one got voted off, it was going to be okay, and they weren't going to say anything bad about the other person. And so they go in there, and here's Donald Trump saying, what'd you think about that? How about this? Did that make you this? Or what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And they're both just kind of sitting there smiling, answering the questions. And then one finally said, we like each other. We decided we weren't going to say anything bad about each other. At that point, Donald Trump realized it was over. He says, okay, well, you're fired. It totally diffused the whole thing because they had a plan, and when things were getting hot, the pressure was on, they followed their plan, and it went according to schedule, okay? So, you need to be honest, you need to keep all that stuff out in the forefront. Keep current. Don't throw things in a gunny sack. You need to attack the problem, not the person. Okay? Attacking the person isn't going to fix anything. And the last part is, you need to act, not react. You need to have a plan of response. When something like this happens, what are you going to do? Now, we need to take a break here for a second. 4 rules of communication. Be honest, keep current, attack the problem, not the person, and act, don't react. You see how if you follow these rules religiously, you do them all the time, this could really make problem solving 15 to 30 minutes together could work. Well, there's more. Here's the second. Oh. She had a problem there. This is my example. I forgot this was here. That's my example of having a plan. If you have a plan, she didn't like him watching so much TV. She kept throwing the TVs out. Well, what's my plan? I'm not going to get mad at her. I'll just get a bigger TV. Either she can't lift it or she won't be able to throw it out the window. One of the two, right? Okay? So, have a plan. Okay. Rules for meeting and rules for meeting to resolve a conflict. Okay. So, let's say you've done your research, you've made your list, you've got your plan, you got this all figured out now. You know what the 4 rules of communication are. How do you actually go about doing something with this now? So you've got a problem with a coach, you've got a problem with the spouse. How's it going to work? Okay? Who should be there to resolve this conflict?
All the parties that have concerns.
All the parties that have concerns. Everyone involved in the conflict. Now, the only exception to this, okay, the only exception to this might be in cases where maybe it is a divorce situation and the problem really has nothing to do with the child. The problem has to do with the 2 parents, and maybe they're using the child as a pawn, something like that. Well, guess what? The kid does not need to be there. You might need a moderator there to help the 2 parties involved to think through some stuff, but the child doesn't need to be there because the child really isn't involved. They might reap the benefits, not the benefits, they might have the ramifications affecting the child, but the child doesn't need to be. The child doesn't need to be there to resolve that discussion. Okay, they don't need to be there. Okay, so everyone involved. When should you meet?
Timing is convenient for all parties involved.
A time agreeable to all involved. It's almost like you looked at the notes. Okay? Now, pick a time that's agreeable to everybody. Now, let me see what the next point is. Okay, when there's least likely interruption, okay, that's the second one. Third one, when you're not at your worst physically, okay? Those are the 3 things you need to keep in mind when you're actually planning a time to meet. Now, time agreeable to involved, you need to talk to people, okay? This is typically what happens. Let's say the problem's with the coach. So you're going to pick your child up from the activity. The coach is putting the soccer balls back in the bag, going around picking up the cones. They haven't been home, they came right to practice from work. And so you walk up to them and say, hey, can I talk to you for a few minutes? And they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And they keep working. And you proceed to then tell them all the knowledge that you have about soccer and how your child should play more because they're more qualified than these 3 kids here and this and that. Well, guess what? The coach really doesn't want to talk to you at that time. The coach is tired. They haven't had dinner. They want to go home and see their family. They're not necessarily at their best physically, maybe not at their worst, but they're not at their best. You've almost jumped them. It's like a surprise attack. They weren't expecting this. Of course, if they sign on to be coaches, they assume this is going to happen, but they don't like it and they don't want it to happen that way. So here's what you can do. You pick a time agreeable. You call the coach up, or you talk to him before practice and say, listen, next Thursday, can I buy you lunch? Or can we go out for coffee? I'll buy you coffee. I'll buy you a Big Mac. What do you want? I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk about some stuff. Just have to do with the kids. You don't have to be scared. I just want to talk about some things and let me buy you lunch. How many coaches have people offer buying lunch? No, coaches are there for parents to yell at, right? That's how they feel. And so, if you diffuse the situation by picking a time and setting something up, that's the way it works. I have this happen all the time. My office is right across the hall here, and I do a lot of stuff in that building and a lot of stuff down in the basement of this building. Okay, there's actually a basement way over there. And so a lot of times, I'm getting things. I'll have stuff in my office. I need to run from that building back here to get something to get back. Well, guess what? When someone sees me, they get something to talk to me about. They have to talk to me right then. And what's happened now is they realize that I'm not going to stand still and talk to them because I have to get back to something that's going on there. I say, okay, let's go. And they start talking, and we walk. And they have to talk to me, and they have to keep up. I've got a pretty good gait, okay? So they have to keep up with me, and they understand if they're going to talk to me without scheduling an appointment, they have to do it the way things are working. People start to do that. So if there's something serious they need to talk about, they call and make an appointment, and we sit down, and we talk. You have to think through this. When you meet, you have to think through all these things, because people don't like to be surprised. I don't know about you guys. Are you kind of stuck in your ways? Yeah? Do you sit in the same spot at your house when you watch TV? Do you always sleep on the same side of the bed? Go ahead.
I understand that now. But it does make good sense, and I didn't yell. You know,
No,
the coach.
we're not talking about that.
Well,
Actually, this is the example I use each time I talk this. It wasn't because of what you said.
but you can't take time all the time like that. Because, you know, I didn't yell and I wasn't rude and
No.
but I did say, as he was packing up,
Yep.
can I talk to you for a moment? And
Yep.
I said, I thank you for volunteering and coaching, but, I
Good,
do
good.
not believe that it is acceptable for you to be cussing at these kids and,
Yep.
so I took it right at that moment, which I was being honest,
Yes, you were.
and that just made him more angry,
Okay.
that I would impress my opinion upon him.
Okay. Well,
So that's good, but that's good. I understand it now, and
actually, there's some more stuff coming here, and we'll get to that, and we'll talk about it towards the end. Yeah.
Oh, I was just curious how you responded to that. I mean, if you say, with the cussing and everything, I'm a coach myself, so I know. But how can you respond to that? I mean, that's not acceptable.
it got bad. And that I would impose my opinion upon him.
Well, it probably wasn't a matter of you opposing his opinion. This has to do with interpersonal relations, and this probably was more about the fact that he knows that he probably shouldn't have been cussing the kids. He knows that one of the parents, or maybe some of the parents, knew it, and now he's just being defensive. He was reacting. He wasn't acting. He didn't have a plan. So I swore at the kid last game. I'm going to do it if one of the parents comes up and talks to me about that. If he'd done that, he probably would have been like, yeah, I know, I lost my cool, I lost my temper, I'm sorry, I already apologized to the kids, and he probably would have had a plan. At least good coaches, that's the way they're going to operate. Bad coaches, they don't.
See, and in that situation, I didn't take time to make a plan.
Yep. Exactly. And, that's one of those things, you have to wait now. If I'm in the checkout line with my kids in the grocery store, and the people in front of me are swearing, in this day and age, I'm not going to say something probably. Because they might have been having a bad day, they might have a knife or a gun on them. And then I'm putting my life and my children's life in danger. That's the culture that we live in today. So, 10 years ago, it would have been nothing to say, hey, watch your language, my kids are right here. And they'd have been like, oh, okay. But we're living in a different world today. And so we have to be careful about how we approach these things. So, yeah, good, very good input, very good input. Now let's move on because there's more to this, okay? Here we go. Where should you meet if you were going to meet with somebody? Now, obviously, coaches, you aren't going to say invite them over to your house for dinner, probably, okay? Probably isn't going to happen. School teachers, do they get invited over for dessert? I could think of some teachers that would think that was pretty nice. What, you're not going to give me a ceramic apple for Christmas? You're going to let me come over to eat some dessert? Well, they might feel like that's intrusive. They're done at the end of the day. Sometimes that's the way they are. Good teachers would be open to that. They'd be excited about that. Okay? So you have to think, where am I going to meet? Here's something to think through. Neutral territory. Why, when they play playoff games for sporting events, do they go to somebody else's sports arena? So that they don't have a home field advantage. That's why. Okay? Neutral territory. Now, part D is use the 4 rules of communication. We talked about those, and we talked about those, and then we talked about them a little bit more. I talked about those for quite a while because that was important. You have to use the 4 rules of communication. combined with all this stuff up here. E, plan to talk for 15 to 30 minutes. And this is why I say that. If you have done your research, if you think you've got your conflict figured out, you come up with your plan of attack. You're not going to attack the person about the problem, okay? You've gone through, you know what your 4 rules of communication are. You've set your time. You've got your list. Guess what? You are so well prepared that you should be able to discuss this intelligently in 15 to 30 minutes. If at 15 to 30 minutes you have not resolved the problem, you need to agree to say, listen, you know what, maybe we're just going to not see eye to eye on this. Sometimes that happens. But what I found, I'm not saying this is true always, but what I found, my personal experience in counseling situations, 15 to 30 minutes, if you're planned and you're prepared, the problem almost works itself out. Because you've taken time to think instead of reacting to stuff. Now, things to say to diffuse an argument. And I'm not going to read through this list, but I had that list. I also included it. Basically, it's transitional sentence when you're talking to people. Things like, I really appreciate your concern about this. And it sounds like you said that to the coach. I really appreciate you giving up the time to give to the kids. Okay? That's fantastic. However, if you said, I really appreciate the time that you give in and give to the kids, and then you throw in the magic word, but, it really negates everything you just said. Okay? So if you said, I really appreciate the thing you're doing about this. Can I talk to you real quick about something though? Or, you know, maybe I misheard you. I thought I heard you swear today. Is that what I heard? And that's, if you look through, there's other things on there about communication. You need to make sure that you actually have your facts straight. A lot of times, what you think you heard, maybe you didn't hear clearly. And I'm not going to go through and read all those things, but you have to take the time to gather that information. Maybe you get so upset right away that you totally forget about doing the research. You totally forget about doing all those other things we've talked about. And if you've done that, you're setting yourself up for conflict. You see how these things all work together? Okay, now, instead of me going through and talking about all of these different things, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, first, do you have any questions? You want me to go back and talk about anything specific or anything you want me to clarify more? And if you don't, then we'll talk about maybe your particular instance or somebody else's. Okay? What do you have for me? Anything?
I do.
Okay, shoot.
Like back here with, let's see here, like, you know, keeping current.
Yes.
And I do understand the gunning sack theory. But if you have a child that, you know, is 13, and this behavior's been happening, you know, for about a month, and you really want to resolve things. So at that point, and then you go through this, and you really want to resolve it and get those communication lines open. So at that point, you just don't go back to say, you know, your behavior, you know, at this event or at this time and this behavior or whatever. Don't go back at all is what I'm asking.
Well, you're being kind of vague here, so I'm going to take a stab at what I think you're asking. What you're saying is somebody has done something that created a conflict back here. Here is a month later. Do you go back and address it and bring yourself up to current?
Because it's kind of the same conflict. It's a behavior issue.
Well, my suggestion would be, okay, without going into great detail here, instead of going back and saying, listen, a month ago you did this, and 2 days later you did it again, and 3 days later you did this, I would say, listen, I just went to this workshop that taught us about resolving conflict. The speaker was amazing. He taught me this amazing thing about keeping current. And
That's what I do everyone.
must not be me to be the one you're going home from. So what you do is you say, listen, they taught us these. Can I show you these real quick? And so you say, look, they said, these are these 4 rules we got to do. It says we have to be honest, we have to keep current, and we have to do this, and we have to do that. You know, you've had this habit or lifestyle, whatever, you know, and it's kind of bugging me. And so here I am, I'm trying to be honest and say, this bothers me. I don't think it's right. If it's your child, I mean, you as a parent, in my opinion, you have the authority to say, you can't do this or you must do this, okay? And I back you up in doing that. So you have to figure out how you're going to start that conversation and bring that up. But basically, if they're 13, their brains are functioning at a higher level. They should be able to understand the 4 rules of communication. And you can say, listen, I want to talk to you about this, but here are these 4 rules. I don't want you to be yelling at me. I'm not going to yell at you. This is this, this is this, this is this. And you go through and explain those things and say, okay, so here's the problem. And then you lay it out. Or you could say, listen, we're going to do this. And here are the 4 rules. And we're going to do something really strange. I'm going to tell you something that's bugging me. And after we get done, you're going to pick something that really bugs you about me. Okay? And you better have a plan for action, not reaction, if you're going to do something like that. But you know what? If you're showing your child you're willing to discuss problems that way, maybe they'll get the idea that, well, maybe it is okay if I've got a problem with mom or dad or whoever. It's okay to talk about it. At our house, if we ask our child to do something, we expect them to do it when we ask them. We don't ask them a second time. We don't ask them a third time. We don't have to raise our voice. We don't have to count to 3. If we ask them, they're expected to do it then. If they have issue with it, or they feel as though it's unjust, we've explained this to them, their responsibility is to obey us and do it right then. After it's done, then you can come back and say, Mom or Dad, I did this for you like you asked, but Mom told me that I wasn't allowed to do this, or, and then they come back and explain to us, and in that case we're saying, thank you for being obedient and doing what we've asked you to do. I appreciate that. And so it builds that thing, so they know it, and then we're like, okay, well, next time, we won't actually do it that way. So it builds that relationship and that communication, keeps that open. So I don't know if that helps, so.
It does, yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Anything else you want to shoot at me here?
How do you get a child, like I said earlier, with you withdrawn? And you said just pick things out of one word, when they give you one-word answers?
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep doing that without pushing them away?
How old?
13,
How long have they been withdrawn?
as long as I've known them. It's my step.
Okay, stepchild? Okay, so how long have you known him?
I've known him since he was 4.
Okay, so quite a while. Okay.
He's not a very talkative child.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel as though, because we talked about signs or the smell of conflict, do you feel as though there's something going on that's created this, or do you think this is just his personality?
Both.
Okay.
And that's where it's kind of confusing, because it's like you don't know if something is really bothering him, or if it's just, I don't know.
I'll throw this at you, okay, just my experience in this matter. In dealing with people that are not real talkative, typically, if they're not talkative, one of their signs is not going to be withdrawn. Okay? They're going to be more on the explosive, or they're going to be more on the anger. It's going to change from being withdrawn to a constant anger. If there's a constant anger, then there probably is some sort of conflict there. A perfect example, one of our janitors here at church has a senior boy here at one of the public schools. And he's just not a real talkative person. He's not mean. He's not antisocial. He loves being around people. But how you doing tonight? Good. So what are you going to do this weekend? I don't know. And it's not that he's antisocial. He really just doesn't know. He doesn't know what he's doing until someone calls him, and he knows what he's doing. And so you have to kind of you have to try to figure out, is there really a conflict there that's causing that, or is this really the person, who they are? And as far as then building a relationship, what kind of things is he into? Does he like skateboarding, video games, monster trucks? You've got to find common ground. And again, that's almost a whole other topic. But my suggestion would be try to find some things that are genuine interest. If you look at the transitional sentences there, I'll point this out. That last page, there's 23 different things there. One of the things I want to say is if you're going to use transitional sentences like this, make sure you're not lying. For instance, if you say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Now think about what that says. If someone has just confronted you with a complaint they have against you, and you say, thank you for bringing that to my attention, are they really happy they brought that to attention? Are you really happy they're keeping current? Well, hopefully you've got a plan for action so you can act and not react, so that you can honestly say, thank you for bringing it to my attention. Because you can say, Thanks for pointing that out to me, okay? That says a whole different thing, doesn't it? That halo data is saying something totally different than, thank you for letting me know about this. So if you're going to use things like that, you have to be genuine, you have to be honest about it. Otherwise, you're not being honest, you're breaking one of the 4 rules of communication, and things are going to fail miserably, and your life will be a wreck. Okay, I'm just joking. Any other questions? Do you want to go back to the coaching thing, or you good with that?
I'm good.
Okay. Something else?
No.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you guys for coming. Again, I gave you post surveys, and hopefully you filled those out or are in the process of it. We're about the time where we start to